All right. So Billy, are you able to post the worksheet in the chat or should I do it?
I can do it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for the introduction, Billy. So again, my name is Jerry Bendifallah. I'm going to be talking about my 5 pillars of recovery to mental wellness, and I actually have a worksheet. I'm not going to be using a PowerPoint, but I do actually have a worksheet that I created that kind of goes along with my speech, with the 5 pillars. So Billy is going to put that in the chat. At the very end, I do have my own feedback form. It's just 3 questions. It's very, very quick, but if you're able to fill it out, it would really help me a lot as I want to just get better and better and better and understand what is helping and what's not helping. And then finally, I would say if you're able to follow along with the worksheet, but even if you're not able to do that, I would invite you to get out a piece of paper and a pencil because there's a couple times I'm going to invite you to write something down. All right. Well, in that case, I think I will get started. Have you ever felt a sudden rush of anxiety at the thought of saying hello to someone? Or maybe feeling awkwardness when wanting to start a conversation with somebody? Or feeling so overwhelmed emotionally that it feels impossible to say anything? I sure have. Did you know that this is a sign of our mental health? Let me explain. As a toddler, I was diagnosed with high functioning autism. After learning how to talk, I shortly became nonverbal again and had to go to speech therapy for, I believe, several years. Fast forward to middle school and high school, I had heavy, heavy social anxiety to the point that I used to have physiological reactions, dried mouth, a tear in my eye at the thought of just saying hello to someone. I could barely utter a few words out of my mouth. Can you relate? I felt so isolated from my classmates, and as a result, my self-worth plummeted. I looked around at everyone else, well-adjusted socially, happy, fun, talkative, and then I saw myself, shy, anxious, scared, and I felt shame. I kept everything to myself, and it didn't even occur to me that I was having a mental health crisis, so I didn't reach out for help. During the time when I was in middle school and high school, mental health wasn't something that was being talked about. The term mental health was not something at that age that I knew anything about. And although there was a school counselor at my middle school and high school, in my mind at the time as a young teenager, I thought that that was only for people dealing with substance use. As a result, I didn't reach out for help and I suffered in silence for years. And as a way to cope, I simply dissociated from my shame and my anxiety and my low self-worth just to get by. Things did start to get better near the end of high school. I started to make friends. I started to become a little bit more confident because I started lifting weights and felt better about myself. And I started to have a better social life for the first time. But the damage that those years in middle school and high school had done was still there under the surface. When it came time for me to decide which college, which university to go to, I made a choice to go to UC San Diego because not one person besides me in my graduating high school class of 126 students was going to go to UCSD. And it was my chance to create a new social identity for myself. I finished high school with a 4.0 GPA, and in college at the prestigious UC San Diego, I had 2 incredible part-time jobs, my first girlfriend, some amazing friends, and a 3.57 GPA as a physiology and neuroscience major, as well as being one of the leaders of an on-campus Buddhist club and an off-campus Buddhist club. Although it seemed normal, although my life seemed normal, that shame, that anxiety that I pushed down a long time ago was still there lurking under the surface. Have you ever pushed an emotion away or stuffed it down because it was too hard to deal with? Well, for me, it wasn't 10 minutes of pushing these emotions away. It was years and years and decades of pushing these feelings away because I just couldn't handle them as a teenager, in college, and in my early and mid-20s. In high school and college, I was always able to keep myself together by focusing on school. But suddenly after college, I was thrust into a new world without any structure or direction for my life. Just to backtrack a little bit, as a neuroscience major in college during my junior year, in general, as a neuroscience major in college, most people are either going to go into scientific research or they're going to go to medical school. I realized I did not want to do scientific research, and I also realized that I didn't have the motivation to do what would have been necessary to study for the MCATs and to do all of the other steps of the process to actually get into medical school. I made the decision that instead of going to school for a 5th year to change my major, that I would just walk away with my current degree after 4 years and just figure out what I was going to do next. Then I thought, when I realized I didn't want to go down the scientific path, I thought, maybe I'll teach English in Japan. After all, I started teaching myself Japanese in college. And about 5 months after graduating from UC San Diego, I graduated in June of 2012. About 5 months later, November of 2012, I took a 7-week vacation by myself to the country of Japan. Unfortunately, while I was there, I got really, really sad and really depressed and really isolated and lonely. And it just made me realize that maybe, just maybe, teaching English in Japan for a large Japanese corporation with a Japanese work ethic, for those who don't know, they have a strong work ethic, and my mental health, as it was just not going to work. In early 2013, I came back to California, and by the spring of 2013, I had officially settled back into living with my parents in my childhood home, where I lived between 2013 and 2015. During this time, I became more and more socially isolated and more hopeless about my life. I used to look forward to sleep at night and dread waking up in the morning because sleep was the one time I felt relief from my symptoms. I started to binge eat at night to cope with what I was feeling and developed a full-blown eating disorder. I began to have terrifying delusions in my mind, which felt more real and more compelling than the outside world around me. I became disconnected from everyone and everything and became extremely suicidal. Everything culminated in 2015 when I spent 3 to 4 days at one psych hospital, 50 straight days at another. That's right, 50, 5, 0, and 4.5 months at a residential recovery program in Boulder, Colorado. The 50-day stay at the psych hospital was one of the worst and most terrifying, depressing experiences of my entire life. While I was there, I was in the middle of a full-blown manic psychotic episode, as well as being in the middle of my eating disorder. I was incredibly defiant when I was at the hospital, spitting my medication in the trash can until the nurses actually caught on and forced me and made sure to watch me, not forced, made sure to watch me take my meds at night. After about 50 days, I was discharged from the hospital, not because I was doing any better, but simply because my health insurance company stopped paying for me to be there, if I remember correctly. The next few months were just as bad as the previous. I was extremely socially isolated, felt extremely hopeless, and felt extremely suicidal. And none of the therapists that my parents tried to find for me were able to help. Thankfully, my parents did not give up on trying to find help for me. And one day, in August of 2015, my mom comes to my door, knocks on my door, opens the door, and says something along the lines of, "Jared, we're going to Colorado. We found a residential. Pack your bags. We're leaving." And for whatever reason at the time, I willingly agreed to go along with the plan. I can still remember that first day at the residential like it was yesterday. My parents were talking to the psychiatrist on staff, and my sister and I were taking a walk in the neighborhood. The entire time that we were walking and talking, all I could think about was throwing myself in front of a car and taking my own life. Spoiler alert, I'm still here. And then it was my turn to talk to the psychiatrist on staff. Have you ever had a moment in your life when you look back and realize that that was the moment when everything changed for the better? Well, for me, it was that first meeting with the psychiatrist. She looked me in the eyes. I sat down in her office and she looked me in the eyes and she asked me a very simple question. A question which, by the way, as a peer support group facilitator, I have asked dozens of times, and I know that it's just standard operating procedure. But when she asked me this question, it changed everything for me. She asked me if I was feeling suicidal, if I was thinking about suicide. And I said, yes. And in that moment, I felt this huge wave of relief because finally it was okay to not be okay. Finally, it was okay to be feeling suicidal. And for the first time in 3 long years, I had hope, real tangible hope that things could actually get better for me. While I was at the residential in Colorado, I got on the right medication to stabilize my brain, overcame my eating disorder, and started to get my life back, to pick up the pieces and to try and create something new for myself. Life at the residential consisted of groups, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, creative writing, physical activity, chores such as cooking and cleaning. Sometimes the staff on the weekends would take us to see a movie or take us on a hike, and then lots and lots of free time. But what I remember the most about the residential was the tough love and support from the staff, the nurse, the therapist, and the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist and the nurse were instrumental in helping me to find the right medication to stabilize the symptoms of my mental health condition, while the therapists and the staff were instrumental in giving me the tough love and support that I needed to overcome my eating disorder. I still remember about 3 days into my time at the residential, I binged one morning. I had tons of food for breakfast, and I went to one of the staff members to tell them that I binged, expecting a sympathetic response from them. But instead, what I got was something along the lines of, well, you got to do better next time. And I'm not saying that this would work for everybody, but I'm saying for me, that was actually what I needed to hear. It made me realize that I was going to be responsible and held accountable for my own recovery journey from my eating disorder. The therapists and the staff were also instrumental in another way helping me recover from my eating disorder. Every single day, they held me accountable and encouraged me and gave me the confidence to have 3 consistent meals, no matter what anxious thoughts or feelings I was having related to food. Their support helped me recover. To put it simply, the residential program saved my life, and I don't know if I would be alive if it weren't for that program. After about 4.5 months, myself, my parents, the staff, the nurse, the therapist, and the psychiatrist all agreed that I was stable enough to move on to the next phase of my life. In early 2016, I came back to Los Angeles, and my parents helped me to find an apartment in West LA. I enrolled in a Japanese class at Santa Monica Community College, where I would go on to get an associate's degree in liberal arts, and humanities from SMC with a certificate in Asian studies. I took 4 levels of Japanese, a Chinese class, a stats class, and some business classes. Then in 2016, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I applied for the USC's, the University of Southern California, USC's master's program in urban transportation planning. Because back in college at UC San Diego, I worked for the Sustainability Resource Center, the Sustainability Program Office, and I had a passion for climate change and climate change mitigation. I wanted to go to USC for their master's program to get people out of their cars and onto the trains and the buses to mitigate climate change. I graduated with my master's from USC in June of 2019. Having that structure at SMC and USC from 2016 to 2019, focusing on homework, essays, projects, and exams, was exactly the type of structure that I desperately needed along my recovery journey, and exactly the type of structure that I didn't have after graduating from UC San Diego in 2012. In 2019, in the summer of 2019, in August, looking to make new friends and add some more structure into my life, I did an internet search for mental health support group West Los Angeles, and I found NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI Westside LA. And I went to my very first support group in August of 2019 at the D.D. Hearst Center in Culver City. And I ended up falling in love with these groups, as corny as that may sound. And I started attending these groups religiously as a participant for years. Then, in the summer of 2020, as I continued to develop my interest in mental health and mental health advocacy, I got my peer support specialist certification with SHARE, of course. And then in October of 2020, I began working in a part-time capacity for NAMI Westside Los Angeles. And since then, I've been working either part-time or full-time as a peer support group facilitator, full-time as a peer support specialist, peer-to-peer class teacher, which is NAMI's 8-week class for adults in recovery from a mental health condition. We talk about all different aspects of mental health recovery. I'm also an Ending the Silence youth and lead presenter, where I go into schools, middle schools, and high schools and talk to kids about mental health and stigma, and I'm a speaker. I've developed these 5 pillars of recovery to mental wellness over the last year and a half or so by simply observing what has worked for me along my own recovery journey, as well as all of the mistakes that I made over the last 2 decades, and observing what has worked for others through my time as part of the NAMI West LA community, through what I learned through SHARE's Peer Support Specialist certification, through my time for another organization with called Cal Voices in Sacramento as a peer counselor, peer specialist, and my other experiences in the mental health field. The 5 pillars of recovery are basic stability, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, having a self-care plan. Pillar number 3, trusting the process of recovery. Pillar number 4, finding your community, finding your tribe. And pillar number 5, expanded self-awareness and following your intuition. Before I keep on moving with this, Billy put in the chat, for those who may have been late, Billy did put in the chat a worksheet that I created. So if you are able to download the worksheet, you can follow along with the worksheet. If not, that's okay too. For those who came late, I would invite you to just take out a piece of paper and a pencil, because I'm going to invite you to write some things down. All right, let's get into it. With all that said, the first pillar is basic stability, which includes clinical support, non-clinical support, and structure. Clinical support typically includes having a psychiatrist and a therapist. With a psychiatrist, you can dialogue and you can work with them to figure out whether medication might be a good route for you to help you to manage the symptoms of your mental health condition. And it's important too to work with your psychiatrist and to work with them to make sure to monitor if you're having any side effects to the medication. Obviously, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience of having a psychiatrist, where one of the things that she helps me with is I keep her in the loop about if we're trying out a medication, how I'm handling the medication, and to decide whether the benefits of whatever medication you and your psychiatrist might choose for you, if the benefits outweigh the drawbacks of the side effects. It's really important in my experience to have somebody who's going to listen to your concerns, because sometimes side effects can be really hard to deal with and they can impact our lives in many ways. So it's important to have a really healthy dialogue between you and your psychiatrist. And what I'll say before I move on to talking about having a therapist is that sometimes it can take time to find the right practitioner, to find the right psychiatrist. But once you find the right person for you, the effort is totally worth it. The second part of having clinical support is having a therapist. In my experience, a therapist is somebody where I feel safe and trusting around, and we have a positive connection with each other, and I feel like I can share with him my struggles and my challenges and my triggers and my traumas. And my therapist in particular is very compassionate, understanding. He brings a lot of expertise to the table, but I would say 50% of the benefit is just the fact that I feel like he's in my corner, that he's there to support me, that I feel like I can vent and feel heard and seen and supported. And then I would say maybe the other 50% is his actual background, his expertise. There's been so many times where, because I trust and feel safe around him, I go to a therapy session and afterwards I feel so much calmer and so much better because I felt like I got support. And not only that, but my therapist can give me concrete suggestions to handle whatever it is I may be dealing with in my life. Just like with a psychiatrist, it may take you time and effort and some false starts to find the right therapist for you. But once you find the right therapist, it is totally worth it. And for me, just to be transparent, it took me about maybe 5 or 6 or 7 therapists until I found the one that I have today. I was actually seeing a different therapist many years before, and I reached out to her and asked her if she knew any other therapists in my area. And she gave me a referral, and that's how I found the therapist that I have today. So you never know how it's going to happen, but it's really a beautiful thing if you find the right clinical support. The second aspect of this first pillar of basic stability is non-clinical support. This includes family, friends, maybe even a life coach or a mentor or a 12-step sponsor. When I was first facilitating NAMI West LA's Saturday afternoon support group, I used to actually make a joke that mental health doesn't take a holiday on the weekends. Well, I would like to extend that to say mental health doesn't take a holiday when we're not in therapy. In my experience, we typically can only see our therapist once a week or maybe twice a week. And they may not be available to text. They may not be available to provide us with additional support outside of those actual therapy sessions. And so that is why it's important that for all those other days and times in our lives when we're struggling, that we can rely on non-clinical support. We can rely on family, we can rely on friends to vent and to talk about our difficulties and to feel seen, heard, and supported and feel less alone. Sometimes just the act of being able to vent and talk about what I'm feeling with somebody who cares about me and who's there to listen eases the intensity of whatever mental, emotional, or psychological burden that I may be carrying. In addition to friends and family, you can have a life coach or mentor or a 12-step sponsor. And they may provide you with support that's different, but complements what you get from your psychiatrist and your therapist. Especially if they've known you over a long period of time, there's probably going to be an established relationship of trust as well. And they can be very, very supportive, and they can really fill out your support system. Even to this day, I'm consistently asking myself, how can I expand my support system? And so I would invite you to say to yourself, to affirm to yourself that you deserve as much support as you need. We all deserve support, especially because being in recovery from one or more mental health conditions can be extremely difficult. I would invite you on a piece of paper to write down one way that you could expand your support system. Maybe you need to find a therapist, or maybe you want to just reach out to a friend that you care about a lot and who cares about you. Just write down one way that you could expand your support system, because again, we all deserve to have support. The final aspect of this first pillar of basic stability is structure. Without structure, in my personal experience, it is too easy to spend all day, every day, thinking about your depression, thinking about your anxiety, thinking about how bad you may be feeling. Structure is a way of saying, yes, I am in recovery, and, as they say in improv, yes, and I still choose to try and live my life in the present day. Between 2013 and 2015, one of The biggest mistakes I made was thinking that I needed to become completely healed, that I needed to fix all the parts of myself that were broken before I could actually live my life. And that mistake, I believe, looking back, not having any structure in my life, and spending all day, every day in my room for the most part, just by myself, that was one of the main reasons why my mental health deteriorated so rapidly. That is why I advocate so passionately for structure as part of basic stability. There are so many ways that we can add structure into our lives. We could join a support group once a week or multiple support groups every week. I found that when I did this in the summer and fall of 2019, I found that just knowing that I had 1 or 2 support groups to go to every week helped me to fill out my schedule and give me a sense that I was doing something with my life. And then all the other days when I had free time felt like free time that I had actually earned. And of course, when it comes to support groups, you could do virtual or you could do in person, depending on the organization. Another way to add structure into our lives is volunteering. You could volunteer at a soup kitchen or an animal shelter at a food pantry. One thing I didn't mention when I was in Colorado was I actually volunteered at a food pantry for 2.5 to 3 months. And volunteering at the food pantry was actually incredibly helpful to overcome my eating disorder. And the reason for that is I used to eat my lunch and then I would have a lot of anxious thoughts and feelings related to food. Because at least in my experience, having that anxiety related to food was part of the process of recovery from the eating disorder. But what I would do is I would actually eat my lunch, walk down the street to the food pantry, immerse myself in the act of volunteering. And by the time I was done with my volunteering shift, all of the anxious thoughts and feelings were gone. I would encourage you to look up an organization you feel passionate about, an organization whose mission you feel passionate about. And then I would encourage you to try to actually volunteer maybe once a week for 2 to 3 hours at a time. And if you enjoy that, you could volunteer 3 to 4 times a week or even more. Going to school or going back to school is another option. There's something so satisfying for me about being in a classroom environment, being around people my age, and being able to make new friends. You could start by taking just one class at a community college. For example, for me, in 2016, I took that class at Santa Monica Community College. And if that feels overwhelming, you could audit a class, which means to simply sit in on the class without being actually registered. Or you could take a class pass-fail, which means whether you get an A, a B, or a C, you're good to go. You were in the class, you learned something, and you had a good time. Another thing you can do is many schools have an office for students with disabilities, which I believe includes mental health conditions. So you can actually go to that office and ask them for accommodations, which could be longer times for exams and later due dates for homework, essays, or projects. You could start by taking just one class for a semester at a community college, which, by the way, is very cheap. And then if you enjoy that and you feel confident that you could do more, then you could take 2 to 3 classes or even a full class load of 4 to 5 classes. Working is another incredible option. There's something in my experience that is so satisfying about earning an income for myself. You could start by doing a low pressure internship somewhere, 5 to 10 hours a week for an organization that you care about. And then maybe you could try to work part-time, 15, 20, 25 hours a week, and eventually a full-time schedule of 30, 35 to 40 hours a week. There are so many different types of structure you could add into your life. And I would just encourage you to think about the type of structure that you would gravitate towards the most. I would invite you on a piece of paper right now to write down the type of structure that you could envision for your life today. Not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now, not 2 years from now, today, January of 2024. The second pillar of recovery is having a self-care plan. This includes cultivating our mental, emotional, and physical well-being, having coping skills that we can use when in distress, and having just one non-negotiable self-care tool that we can use every single day along our recovery journey. The first part, cultivating our mental, emotional, and physical well-being, involves sitting down with intention and actually trying to come up with a self-care plan for ourselves. If we don't actually take the time to plan it out, we're more likely to get caught up in the ups and downs of life and forget to actually practice self-care. It's important that you take the time to really think about, how do I cultivate my mental and emotional well-being? What are the self-care tools that I gravitate towards? What are the self-care tools that help me on a daily basis? What can I do to cultivate my physical well-being as well? And write it down and then internalize that plan, that structure, so that it will just become a natural part of your day every day to practice self-care. The second part of this second pillar is having coping skills that we can use when in distress. The great boxer Mike Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." The reason I'm bringing this up is because as intentional and focused as we can be every day in practicing self-care, life in recovery can still be really hard. Triggers happen, life events happen, and there are going to be times, in my experience, where we are super, super, super stressed out. When I get super stressed out, I actually like to rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I'm super calm and 10 is I'm stressed out of my mind. And there are times when I feel like a 12 out of 10 or a 15 out of 10. And it's those moments when I need coping skills that can take me from a 12 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. Because in my experience, once I'm down to a 7, 6, or 5, I'm no longer in panic mode. And I can start to think about what I need to do to handle the situation, to deal with whatever situation is at hand. And I'm a little bit calmer. There's so many coping skills that we can use when we're in distress. Some of the things that have worked for me are venting to family, venting to friends, maybe even texting my therapist to set up an appointment, which gives me the confidence that even if I'm struggling today, I can get support in a few days later with my therapist. I also will call a warm line. If anybody doesn't know what a warm line is, it's a free telephone service that you can call to talk to a peer support specialist or even a counselor, and to have them and they will be there for you as you want to vent and talk about what you're going through, and they can even give you advice if you would like it. Sometimes it's even nice to talk to a stranger because they're not involved in your actual life and they're non-biased, but they can still provide a lot of emotional support. There are probably dozens, maybe even hundreds of warm lines across the country. And in my experience, for some warm lines, you don't need to actually live in the same city that the warm line is based in. Another one of my favorite coping skills when I'm in distress is the voice memo app on my phone. Now, I don't know, I'm sure whether it's Android or iPhone or whatever phone you may have, whatever modern phone you may have, you probably have some type of voice memo recording app on your phone. And what I like to do when I'm super stressed out, but I have nobody that I can talk to in the moment, or I'm dealing with an issue that I don't feel comfortable bringing up with people, I take up my phone, I open the voice memo app, I press record, and I literally will vent. I will vent to myself. I will externalize everything I'm thinking and everything I'm feeling. And I'll talk to myself, as silly as it sounds. I will talk to myself for 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 minutes at a time. And by the time I finish venting, I'm down to a 7 or a 6. By the time I finish venting, I may even realize, oh, this is the emotion that I was experiencing. This is the underlying trigger that I was experiencing. I would invite you to take time, if you can, to think about the coping skills that work best for you. And a tip that I got from a therapist at my residential was to actually take out an index card. And on that index card, write down your top 3 or top 5 coping skills that you can use when in distress. That way, when you find yourself super stressed out, you can take it out and be reminded of the things that worked for you. The other aspect of this second pillar is having just one non-negotiable self-care tool that you can use every single day. This should be something that provides you with an anchor, that provides you with a foundation for your recovery journey. It should be something that feels natural for you, that feels good for you. If it doesn't come naturally, if it's not something that you enjoy doing, it's not going to be your number one consistent non-negotiable self-care tool. This could be anything from exercising 4 to 5 times a week to some form of creativity, or in my case, journaling. When I journal, it's a chance for me to express everything I'm thinking and everything I'm feeling without having to worry about what anybody's going to think about it. It allows me to regulate my emotions, and it gives me a sense of being on a journey filled with meaning and purpose. The more that I journal every day, the more that I carve out that time for myself, I'm able to notice the small things that happen every day that indicate I'm making progress along my recovery journey. According to one study by UCLA psychologists, the act of journaling, or simply the act of labeling a feeling and putting it into words, the act of externalizing it and putting onto paper what we're feeling, the act of labeling that feeling, can actually activate a part of our brain known as the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is, of course, the part of our brains that enable us to think rationally and logically. And having greater activation in the prefrontal cortex, if I understand correctly, can help to calm down the fight or flight reaction in our brain. Not only that, but when we label a feeling and put it into words, it actually reduces the activation of a part of our brain known as the amygdala, which is associated with the experiencing of emotions. And that is why I talk about journaling, labeling our feelings. That is why I even talk about venting to family and friends, because it's externalizing, it's labeling out loud what we're feeling, or even venting to, or even recording yourself venting to yourself. I would invite you on your piece of paper to ask yourself and to write down, what is your non-negotiable self-care tool, if you have one? And if you don't have one, I would invite you to write down, what is one thing that you've been curious about, or one thing that you think you could actually try and see if it could become that anchor for your self-care, that foundation for your self-care. The third pillar of recovery is trusting the process of recovery. As in journaling, when we notice those small moments every day of progress, it indicates to our inner self that we are moving in the right direction. The more that we do this, the more that we pay attention to these small victories every day, the more momentum it builds along our recovery journey, and the more faith it builds in ourselves and in the process. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, once said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Even the longest and most difficult of journeys has to start somewhere. We must start from where we are and move forward courageously every single day. It doesn't mean that we won't have bad days or setbacks. It just means that when we have a bad day or setback, we pick ourselves up and keep on moving forward. Write down this affirmation if you can. Trusting the process leads to progress. Again, trusting the process leads to progress. In my experience, when I make progress, I feel proud of myself, and it gives me hope that as hard as mental health recovery can be at times, because it can be difficult, that I'm actually moving in the right direction. And sometimes, even if I can't see 10 steps ahead into the future, just knowing that that day I improved by 0.5% or 1% gives me the confidence and the courage that I need to keep on moving forward and to not give up. I'd like to share with you one example that I hope will provide more clarity for you on this pillar. How many of you ever tried to lose weight? How many of you have ever tried to gain weight or gain muscle? Can we typically lose 10 pounds of fat in a single day? Typically not. Can we typically gain 10 pounds of muscle in a single day? Again, probably not. As a junior in high school, I was a 110-pound scrawny stick figure of a teenager, and I decided that I wanted to put on some muscle, to put on some bulk. I made a plan for myself, and every week I went to the gym to work out my different muscle groups: chest, triceps, back biceps, and legs. Each time I did a particular exercise for a particular muscle group, I would either increase the amount of weight that I was lifting by 2.5 to 5 pounds or increase the number of repetitions for each set. In order to keep myself motivated, I recorded all of my progress in a notebook. In this way, I was able to put on 32.5 pounds of muscle in just 18 months. This demonstrates the power of making incremental progress over time while reaching for a goal that's meaningful to you. These small improvements, these can lead to big improvements and big gains over time. Remember a time when you looked at yourself in the mirror and you didn't even recognize that person? That is similar to how it can be on your mental health recovery journey too. Trust in the process. Have faith that if you take things day by day and week by week, you can achieve miracles in your life. People will look at you and be blown away by the progress you've made and by the person who you've become. You just have to trust the process. The fourth pillar of recovery is the power of community. Finding your community, finding your tribe. This could be anything from a meetup group to a support group in your area. I'm sure most of you know meetup.com, but it's basically a website where you can actually go and find events happening in your area, events that are organized by people who are also on meetup.com. You could find a board game event or a language exchange group or a dodgeball group or a hiking group. It's basically a website where you can go to find groups that you could attend where people have similar interests as you do. And hopefully you can go and make friends and be part of a community. Another type of support is through support groups. And in my experience, support groups are typically a place where people with a similar or identical life condition, such as a physical health condition or a mental health condition, come together in a safe and authentic space where they can share openly about their struggles and their challenges, and they can feel seen, heard, and supported. When I was actually taking Share's peer support certification in the summer of 2020, during week 2, I believe, they told us about a Canadian study about people living with bipolar, where those who had readily accessible, readily available, tangible social support in their lives were more likely to hold down employment and to live and work independently. So going back to the first pillar, having that non-clinical support, friends and family, being part of a community, being part of a support group community, for example, these can have higher level impacts on our recovery journey. In the case of this study, the higher level impact was people actually being able to work independently and create a new life for myself. It impacts people's ability to have structure in their lives as well and to move in the right direction. Because as I mentioned earlier, one of my mistakes was isolating myself socially after college and not having any structure in my life, not moving towards anything. So there's a lot of power in having tangible social support. For me, community came through NAMI Westside Los Angeles and their peer connection support groups, which I attended religiously as a participant, and I now facilitate on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Within 3 to 4 weeks of going to these groups in 2019, I just knew that I had found my community of people who could understand my struggles and I could understand theirs. I didn't have to feel embarrassed to talk about what I was going through. In fact, people could often understand and relate and encourage me to share. My call to action to you would be this: spend just 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, doing an internet search for a meetup group or a support group in your area and make a commitment to attend at least one group one time. I promise you, the effort and the risk that it may take to put yourself out there and meet new people is going to be totally worth it once you find a place you can call home, once you find your community. The fifth and final pillar is expanded self-awareness and following your intuition. This includes knowing your strengths, your talents, your gifts, as well as your struggles and your challenges, and using the power of your intuition to guide you toward your deepest dreams and your soul's purpose. This fifth pillar, however, cannot come before the first pillar of basic stability and the second pillar of having a self-care plan. But once you have these first two pillars taken care of, this fifth pillar can add so much richness and fulfillment into your life. You will be amazed by the people you meet and by the experiences you can have, and everything that you went through along your recovery journey, when you get to this point, will have deeper meaning for the first time. There are so many ways that we can expand our self-awareness. We can talk to friends or family or even our therapist, life coach, mentor, or sponsor, and we can ask them what they think our positive qualities are. Because I know for me, I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, when I am struggling in my recovery journey and I'm feeling down about myself, I'm feeling bad about myself, sometimes what I need to hear and what I need to be reminded of are my positive qualities. And so talking to friends and talking to family, or maybe even talking to your life coach or therapist or sponsor who's known you for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, can help us to lift our moods. They can help us to lift our moods and feel better and to become more self-aware. And yes, I would be happy to put the 5 pillars, in the chat at the very end. So again, talking to friends and family can be a great way to gain more self-awareness and insight into who we are as people and insight into the positive qualities that we do have. For example, in 2018, I was visiting a friend on the East Coast, and one day I asked him what he thought my best qualities were. And he gave me a list of 8 to 10 qualities, some of which I knew very well, but some of which I was surprised by, and they made me feel better about myself. Another thing you could do, of course, is talk to your therapist or life coach because they've known you for a long time and they've probably witnessed your growth over a long period of time, and they can remind you how far you've come. So you can talk to all these different people in your life and use tools to become more self-aware to help you understand who you are as a person and the positive qualities that you have to share with the world. Another way to become more self-aware is to take a personality test. I'm sure some of you here have heard of the Myers-Briggs personality test. Well, I took it a long time ago and I realized that I believe I am INFJ. And I kid you not, when I was taking the test and I got my results, I got a list of 25 to 30 characteristics associated with my personality type. And I literally related to 28 or 30 out of 30 characteristics. And it made me realize, wow, I actually have a lot to offer. And yes, oh my God, this is how I am, or I do have that quality. And so it really helped me to become more self-aware in my life. Another type of a personality test is the Enneagram test as well. And I'm sure there are other personality tests out there that you can find with a Google search. Finally, another way to become more self-aware is to journal. I talked earlier about the benefits of journaling, but one thing I didn't touch on too much was that when we journal, we can actually become more self-aware, because just the act of having a consistent journaling practice almost requires us to talk about our thoughts and talk about our feelings and talk about our experiences and to reflect on our experiences. And the more that I consistently reflect on my life, the more self-aware I become. Sometimes I will look back and I will see what I wrote 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 2 months ago. And suddenly I will understand something that I went through back then from a completely different perspective. Or maybe something that I went through many years ago is informing something that I'm going through today. Maybe there's some type of theme in my life. Journaling can be a fantastic tool to become more self-aware. According to a 2016 study from Europe's Journal of Psychology, as I learned about in an article on the website Psych Central, in a medically reviewed article from Psych Central, practicing self-awareness can lead to greater self-acceptance and self-confidence as well. Because the more that we practice self-awareness, the more that we become aware of our positive qualities and our traits, and maybe even our struggles, the more clearly we can see ourselves. And in my mind, at least for me, the easier it will be to feel better, to say, wow, I have all these qualities to give back to the world and to give back in relationships. And it can help us to accept ourselves more and to feel more confident. I would invite you this week to just do one thing, one simple thing to expand your self-awareness, whether it's talking to family and friends, whether it's taking a personality test, journaling, or something else. Just do one thing this week to expand your self-awareness. The final aspect of this fifth pillar is following your intuition and taking what I like to call enlightened action based on your intuition. The great Albert Einstein once said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind a faithful servant." We have created a society that honors the servant but has forgotten the gift. Have you ever known something without knowing how you knew it? That is the power of intuition. You can use your intuition to guide you, to help you figure out what you want to do with your life, what you emotionally gravitate towards. You can also use it as an internal filter whenever you come across any information to decide whether you resonate with it or not. Because after all, you are your own ultimate authority on your life. Intuition, it doesn't always make sense to the rational, logical mind. It can come out of nowhere and be unexpected, but that is actually the beauty of it. I'd like to share with you 2 examples from my life about intuition and how that's guided me and led me to where I am today. In the summer of 2020, probably around the time that I was finishing my peer support specialist training with Cher, I was taking a walk in my neighborhood, and suddenly I had this idea come to me to get trained to become a support group facilitator for NAMI Westside, Los Angeles. The idea was not something I had thought about before. Although I had been attending these support groups as a participant for so long, I never once thought about facilitating the groups myself. I followed the intuition, got trained, and leading these support groups has been one of the most fulfilling parts of my life to this day. It's taught me leadership. It's taught me responsibility. It's given me a sense of pride and accomplishment and self-confidence because it's something that I'm good at. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who appreciate my efforts. And it helps me along my recovery journey. There's actually something which I learned through Cher called the helper principle, which basically states that the people helping others sometimes, often even, get more benefit than the people being helped. I can say this applies for me 150%. I can't tell you how many dozens of times I have been having a bad day along my recovery journey. Maybe I'm having a setback. And then I have to show up to group, I have to open the group, I have to be there, and I have to lead, and I have to support others. And by the time the group is over, I feel drastically better than before the start of the group. The second event in my life happened later in 2020. I was at a FedEx store one day and I turned my head to the left and I saw a bookshelf against the wall in the far right-hand corner. And on this bookshelf, my eyes immediately went to a book written by the curator of TED Talks, Chris Anderson, all about public speaking. This book right here. And in that moment, I had this intuitive feeling this intuitive knowing, this certainty that I was supposed to pick up that book, read that book, and learn how to become a public speaker, which led me to joining a Toastmasters International Club in 2021, two more in 2023. I participated in the last two international speaking competitions in 2022 and 2023, and it's led me to speaking at various NAMI events, giving my 5 pillars of recovery speech at various NAMI events, as well as leading me to this very moment with you here today. Becoming a public speaker was not something I had thought about before that intuition came. It was not something I had been consciously thinking about doing. But when the intuitive hit came, I like to call them intuitive hits, it was completely unexpected. But I'm so glad and so grateful that I followed the intuition, because speaking has given me a sense of confidence, purpose, direction in my life, and I enjoy being on stage and talking to you all here today. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you today and share my 5 pillars, because public speaking is something that I truly enjoy. We can use our intuition. We can use our intuition to help us become aware of the next steps in our life that can bring us closer to our deepest dreams and our soul's purpose. Then, when we take what I like to call enlightened action based on our intuition, we can move our life forward in a way that brings us closer to our purpose and closer to greater happiness and fulfillment. That is what your intuition is designed to do. It is designed to guide you towards your most authentic life. I hope I've left you with plenty of ideas to think about and several action steps to take. I truly believe that these 5 pillars of recovery, which have helped me tremendously on my own recovery journey, can help you or a loved one as well. Recovery can be difficult at times, but no matter what happens, don't give up and keep on moving forward. You will look back at who you used to be 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and you will be blown away by the person who you've become and how far you've come from where you used to be. I'd like to leave you with these 2 questions. Question number 1, where am I along my recovery journey? And question number 2, what next step do I need to take to move my life forward? Remember, recovery from a serious mental health condition is possible, and hope, the ultimate currency of life, as I like to call it, is real. Thank you. And yes.
Thank you, Jared.
And I got a message in the chat.
Now?
So yeah, Billy, maybe could we post the worksheet again and then also post the Google form in the chat?
Sure.
Well, anyways, thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate your presence and being here to listen to the presentation. For those who came in late, I'm going to put the 5 pillars in the chat. And I'll put the 5 pillars in the chat. And then what I did was I have a worksheet for everybody who attended. I have a worksheet. And that summarizes, that goes into some detail about each of the 5 pillars. And you're welcome to just keep that for yourself. And we're also going to post a Google form in the chat. It's 3 quick questions. It's very short, but it just helps me to continue to refine my presentation. But I'm going to go ahead and put the 5 pillars in the chat.
Done.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Number 2. So I just put the 5 pillars in the chat, and then yeah, Billy has put the Google Doc. 3 quick questions. If you're able to fill it out, that'd be awesome. And Billy, I think we would have about 11 minutes left. It's 3:04.
Right. So if you want to take some questions, you
If
can do
anybody
that
has
now.
questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them. And the worksheet has my email if anybody feels compelled to reach out as well.
I can't access the Google Docs, so we have to get it by email. I have to email whoever in the provider of the trainings. Because the county doesn't, I don't have a Google to access them. It's been coming up in other chats as well. People don't always have access to Google.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they're gonna make it work for us to be able to do, your, evaluation or whatever. they
oh,
have.
okay.
Right.
So I guess you're not able to see open the Google Doc?
No.
Huh.
Yeah, because it asks you to sign into Google and we're at work, I'm at work and I can't do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's okay if you're I don't know, Billy, what do you think? I mean, is that possible? Something to send out or?
Um,
I think
that's-
because somebody else had the same problem in another program. So I think I sent a message and we have to message somebody and say, hey, we attended these. Can we get I guess they can send it to us by email.
Yeah, that's right. And another presentation, people put their email in the chat directly to Jared, and then he would write them down and send it to you.
Oh,
That was just
Wendy, are you looking for proof that you attended the
no,
The
I
talk?
was just I don't need proof that I attended. I mean, I know that you can get a certificate, but there's also, the piece that probably he was, to evaluate or to let him, I don't know. There was 2 pieces to it, but we can't access it.
Okay, I'm gonna put a link in the chat with for you to do a presenter evaluation for share.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I see.
you can also get a certificate of attendance also.
Okay, let's see if I
Okay.
can access that.
But yeah, I mean, I could email you the Google form.
Yeah, I can put my email in
If
there.
you want to put in your email, I'd be happy to email you the Google form. Awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody in the chat for your kind words. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really good because it was relatable. So your story helped us understand it.
Yeah, thank you. I always try and tell the story first, so you guys actually know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I think that's still a Google Doc. Yeah, that's still a Google Doc. So sending that to me, I still can't get it. Just
So you won't be able to do it anyways.
yeah. I think if you email it to me, yes, but he still tried to give me a Google Doc.
If I email it to you, you will be able to?
If you email it to me, I think I can. I think.
Okay.
If not,
And
I can send it to my
I'll put in
personal.
my email in the chat in case anybody wants to reach out. If anybody's on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect too. But that's my email in the chat.
Jean, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine. I was just going to give more advice. That's me. No, I was just going to say exactly what she said. Wendy could then forward it to her private email, and
Yeah. If you email it to me, right, then I can figure out how to access it.
Sure. Are you able to access the worksheet or no?
If you email it to me, I won't be able to do it off my work
Okay.
computer. Like I just tried and it says to sign in. So
If you'd like, I can email you the worksheet too.
Yeah, it's a Google, right? So I don't have a Google login at work.
Okay.
But if you email me the link, and I put my email in the chat,
Yeah, I wrote it down. Yeah.
okay, and then I can then from there send it to my personal and then do the Google.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Jean's
Yeah, and
laughing.
if you want, I can send as an attachment the PDF that has the worksheet to go
Oh,
on.
that'll work too. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.